Okay, here we go. Welcome to the Bill Moran Show. This is Bill Moran. Before we move on, Kelly Rosella has some announcements.
Well, here at WVLP, our listeners are our single most important source of funding. So please go online at www.wvlp.org/support and contribute today. You can make a recurring monthly pledge or a one-time gift. Any amount will contribute to the ongoing quality and variety of programming that you have come to expect from WVLP.
Thank you, Kelly. With us today, we have Brianne Coleman, who is the president of the president of, go ahead, tell us your company name.
Dimensions of Intersections.
Dimensions of Intersections, thank you. Before we begin talking to Brianne, we wanted to talk to you about one important programming note. This is actually going to be the last time you hear us in this time slot. We have joined forces with All Rise, which is a program that is broadcast on Fridays at 10 o'clock on Friday. And they are supported by the PAC program in Porter County and Recovery Connection, which is a resource for people who have substance abuse problems, and they kind of guide them through the areas and provide education as well for the Porter County Jail for folks who are in jail that have been indicted on some type of possession or use or selling. So we thought, because we do cross a lot of topics commonly, we would try to join forces and create not necessarily one show, but put our shows together so that we can utilize the time frame of that 2 hours to talk about a variety of topics. And they may be separate. 1 hour will be the Bill Moran Show, covering community-based topics. And then as we get into All Rise, those will be more topics related to substance abuse and resources available in the community. So keep tuned, and for those of you who lacked our Facebook page, more information about that will be coming up. Again, that will be Wednesday from 11 to 1 p.m. So stay tuned, and again, the Bill Moran Show will be coming on first, and then All Rise will be coming on second during that time slot. So with that, let's turn the mic over to Brianne Coleman. Welcome to our show, Brianne.
Thanks, Bill. Nice to be here.
And if you can, tell us a bit about yourself, where you were born and raised, and where you went to school, and finally all the way up to today.
Okay. I was born in actual Yuma, Arizona, the middle of the desert, but I've grown up in Northwest Indiana my whole life. I've lived in Portage and Lake Station, Hobart, Gary, Maryville, so I've been all over. I have a pretty diverse living experience, I'll say that. I am currently in my last few days of school. I am graduating from Purdue Saturday with my master's in business. And so that's just the start of this the end of something amazing and the start of something new and very exciting for me.
That is amazing, and that's this Saturday, right?
Yes.
We'll be thinking about you as you're at that day. Wish we could be there, but
We'll be there in spirit.
we will, definitely, definitely. So let's talk a bit about your story and what brought you to develop this organization that provides resources for victims and survivors of domestic abuse and rape and sexual aggression.
My story started very, very young. At 4, I was molested by an uncle, and that it kind of sets a tone. I think a lot of people don't really realize that early traumas will impact your decisions as you mature and kind of become an adult. So that started for me at 4, and then I saw a little bit of domestic violence at home, not as much as I went through, but enough to think that that kind of behavior was acceptable. And then when I was 17, I was raped on a date. I never reported it. I kept it very much to myself because I thought it was my fault. I must have led him on. And so I kind of kept that one internalized for a super duper long time. And then when I was 22, I met my abuser. He's the father of my son. We spent about 2 years together, and I experienced some tremendous abuse at his hands. I've had repeated concussions that have caused a traumatic brain injury that impacts my balance and my ability to sometimes walk and do other things. You know, he sexually assaulted me at gunpoint at least once, put a gun in my mouth at least once, has hurt me in front of my kids while I was pregnant. He tried to beat me to terminate my pregnancy. And it always starts somewhere, and I saw these red flags in hindsight. It's easy for a person to go back and look like, oh wow, I saw like 1,000 red flags, but when you're in the moment, when you're in love, you don't see any of that. You are very blind to what's right in front of you, and clearly I was. The first time I got hit was New Year's Eve 2002, going into 2003, and I got beat with a belt, a leather belt, for an hour because I didn't want to lay with him while he was sick. The next day I left, but found out I was pregnant a couple weeks later and went back. And it was a cycle of violence that never ended until I finally ended it. I could go on for days on some of the stories, but when I tell you that sexual assault goes hand in hand with domestic violence, it does. Sex is never an option, it's more of a forced act. And for me, that's what I experienced. You know, and then another thing that I want to touch base on with, as far as my story goes, is it affects your kids. You know, your kids see things and they believe it to be normal, and it's up to us as parents and survivors, especially me, to teach my kids different and teach them otherwise. And so I push that with them a lot. Again, something that goes hand in hand with all this is my abuser had mental health issues. So he was diagnosed bipolar when he was 9, but his mom unfortunately did not get him the care that he needed as a child, and so as a young adult, again, this was behavior that he thought was okay. He never sought out treatment or medication, and so I was on the receiving end of his ups and downs. Our son that we had was born with some mental health issues as well. He was diagnosed at 5 with a mood disorder after having suicidal ideations at 4. And knocking a girl's teeth out when he was 5. So that's when that started, and now he's 14, and I've had to fight to get services for him because I want him to be everything that his father was not able to be, and I wanted to be the mother that his father did not have. And so I fight for my son, I fight for victims and survivors of domestic violence, and my organization is really here. We're building our brand, and we're trying to get some funding and get things going, so that we can start providing more services in Northwest Indiana and South Chicago, because they're both lacking adequate resources. Yes, there are some great shelters out here that are housing victims. There's great rape crisis centers out here that are housing victims, not housing victims, but assisting victims. And I feel like there's more room for more. There's room for more. A lot of these places can only house, up to 30 people, and that includes children. The number of 911 calls related to domestic violence is astronomical. So, my hope is that by using my voice and telling my story and continuing to make women and men feel comfortable enough to disclose what they've been through, I think that we can really see a major impact in the way domestic violence, sexual assault, child molestation, harassment, stalking, all of those things are looked at, and they need to be taken more seriously because we deserve that, you know.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the problems that we talked about before the show started, the shaming of the victim. And first of all, you have to build up the courage to act,
Yes.
to call 911, to go to the police station or ask for help, and then to be turned around and run into more obstacles. It's just extremely more damaging, as damaging as the act itself.
It makes it very difficult for anybody to feel like they're getting the justice that they need. Domestic violence is probably the most widely committed crime, but the most underreported and underconvicted, and that says a lot. And then when you look at sexual assault and rape, sexual assault is again one of those things that are not reported as often as they are because people are shamed. You know, you got the person that has attacked you, you know, making you feel terrible about it, and like, oh, well, you asked for it, you were wearing a short dress, or, you know, however they want to justify it, that's what they do. And so nobody reports it.
And we're going to get into that a little bit later here about shaming of the victim, which has taken a political stance recently, which I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around, that anyone would take a violent act and use it as a political tool to shame a victim. Just unheard of. So one of the things too, do you want to talk about some of the things that you ran into when you went to press charges?
Yeah, so the first time I got hit by him, I did not call the police. I just left. I didn't know what to do. I think I was more embarrassed than anything, so I didn't want to like tell anybody what had happened. And literally, I kind of kept it as a secret. No one knew how bad it had gotten. When I went back after I found out I was pregnant, I mean, he locked me in an apartment, right, for a month with no phone, no access to anything. So I just was convinced that nobody was going to want to help me. But when I did leave in November of 2003, I was lucky enough to go to the Gary Police Station, and I served in the military. So my former boss was the detective who was taking the report. So in that regard, I was very, very lucky that I knew somebody who knew me. With all that being said, you know, they took the SWAT team to the house, and he had my son. He had kidnapped our baby, and we fought to get him back, and it was good. But they held him for 72 hours and let him go with no charges. After I had a body full of bruises, and you know, they did nothing. So I left, and I went and got some respite, some care at a shelter. And when I came back, I got an apartment in Portage, and I had welcomed him back again. Just so you guys know, the return rate for an abuser and his victim is on average 7 times before a woman finally stays away. I luckily only did it 3, but that last time he raped me and slept with my phone. And the next day, I called 911, filed charges, but then he got very angry and he started doing the stalking thing and the harassing thing. I got, within an hour, maybe 40 phone calls between my house phone and my cell phone with him threatening to kill me and my kids. And he was singing on there. It was insane. And so I called the police, and the police came out the first time. They're like, oh, I didn't hear anything. You know, he just dismissed it. And I remember feeling so frustrated. And so I listened to the voicemails over and over again, which I hated that I had to do, because I'm reliving this thing over and over and over. And I finally called him back. I said, listen, he is singing on this voicemail threatening me. He's threatening to kill me and my children. You have to do something. So he came back out. He said, oh, yeah, I can hear it. And I'm like, do something about it. He's like, well, tomorrow you can go and file for a restraining order, which I did. And then we went to court. We had a court date, and he was there. And the judge gave him 5 months of probation, no jail time, no charges of domestic violence or domestic abuse, nothing. Just put him on, like, as long as you stay out of trouble for 5 months, you know, this would be off the record. And that's exactly what happened. And here I am, you know. He stayed away from me, luckily, but it's, again, that lack of justice that you get. Like, he assaulted me, he threatened me, and he beat me, and you give him 5 months of probation.
one of the things that you were here during our roundtable discussion on domestic violence, so I asked the question of our panelists. You have the indictments where the person that committed the crime is charged, but then you have a long road because there's hearing and then court case is put in effect. And what shocked me is the number of cases that are dropped, just absolutely dropped. Severe cases that are dropped, and that the prosecutor's office doesn't give any reason for the case being dropped. And we hear stories about threats, intimidation, and also, of course, the person has legal representation, and a lot of times they'll try to delay things before it gets to trial to kind of weaken the witness or weaken the victim, if you will. So again, all damaging effects on the original act. Let's move on, and we want to talk specifically about, and this has come to light recently, in all these accusations of prominent people in our society, whether they be celebrities, news people, the Me Too campaign that went out, that just amazing impact. And so do you want to talk about that a bit, and what you witnessed, and then I've got some numbers here as well.
Okay. The Me Too movement, surprise to most will probably be that it's been out for about 10 years. I would be lying if I said I remember who introduced it, but about 10 years ago it started to make some kind of social media noise, but it never took off. A lot of, like anything that's social media based, celebrities usually are the ones that can get it to propel. So Alyssa Milano recently, after the Harvey Weinstein outing, she came up with the hashtag MeToo and started using it again, and it was used there to be a voice for us to kind of disclose things that have happened to us and know that this person is not alone and that we're all kind of fighting the same battle together. I wanted to read a quote that Alyssa Milano had posted, and it was, "If all women who have been sexually harassed or assaulted wrote Me Too as a status, we might give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem." And that's exactly what happened. The Me Too hashtags have had some astronomical numbers. I'll let Bill go ahead and disclose those, but it's been absolutely incredible, and it's really given us a voice back, which I think is cool.
Yeah, so nearly 68,000 people have so far replied to Milano's tweet, and the Me Too hashtag has been used more than 1 million times in the United States, Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. French, Spanish, and a mixture of Arab countries are using their own hashtags. Now, I've noted something actually that we posted. The French had kind of an interesting term that they've assigned to this, their own version of Me Too, which is pretty out there. I don't want to say out there, but it pretty drove home the fact. It was "out your pig," which I thought was very appropriate.
Absolutely.
And then I don't know about Spanish or the Arab countries. I just recall seeing the French one. And so then Facebook said that within 24 hours, 4.7 million people around the world engaged into the Me Too conversation, with over 12 million posts, comments, and reactions. It's amazing, all of this underlying I don't know if you call it shame that was put on them. They're afraid to come out. But then we have a social media event that gave voice and courage to a lot of people. And the Harvey Weinstein is probably the most popular. He was the one that, and boy, talking about coming out. I mean, Kelly's an actress, and she could. I don't think she had a whole lot of respect for him and what she's heard about him, but it's just amazing to see that voice come out.
Yeah.
But what happened, which is bothersome to me, because I've been involved in politics with my dad since I was a wee one. He drug me around, and I saw Gary at its worst, and some pretty tough political battles where windows were broken out. But I witnessed something during this whole Me Too thing that was shameful for our society. Al Franken. was accused by Leanne Tweeten of being groped while they're doing an event, and actually there's a picture of him taken, with his hands appearing to be over her breast, but then Leanne Tweeten said that he actually forced a kiss on her, and then some other people came out. But the disturbing thing about the whole Leanne Tweeten is that shortly after she came out and had her accusations, a tweet was brought out showing her spreads in Playboy and she was a model before she became a news anchor and a sportscaster. But they showed all these provocative posts and saying, well, this is the type of person that's giving an accusation, Elle Franken. My first thought was, how dare they attack a victim? And Elle Franken actually came out and admitted, yes, I just acted inappropriately, and I gotta say, Elle did the right thing. He fessed up to it. He kind of backpedaled a bit, but he came out and said, I did it, I apologize, it's just not me. But then some other people came out, like a woman that took a picture that amazed me with her husband taking the picture. Supposedly Elle put his hand on her buttocks and during the picture, and again he came out and apologized for that. But then you witness this shaming of victims, and to me, the political environment isn't where this belongs. The shaming has got to stop because it keeps people from coming out. Do you want to talk to that? Excuse me. About what your feelings are, and Kelly, please jump in.
So shaming, victim blaming and victim shaming are very common in this realm. It's easy to say, oh, her dress was so tight I couldn't help it, or she was asking for it, she was dancing with me provocatively at a club, as related to a sexual assault. Those things are really sad, but when we're talking about Harvey Weinstein and some of the other celebrities, I'll run off a couple of the names. You got Nick Carter, he was a singer, if you guys remember, from early in the 2000s, and you got Louis C.K., a comedian, and big actors like Richard Dreyfuss and Dustin Hoffman, Steven Seagal. That's insane, right? These are people that have positions of power. You have Russell Simmons. That's been the biggest one, I think, this past week. Just talking about him stepping down from Def Jam. I think there was, multiple accounts of him having touched and/or assaulted some women. And of course you have the Charlie Roses and the Mal Hours and the people respected in media. And the thing that I'll say with all that is people who are in positions of power and/or notoriety, and that can include politicians, that can include celebrities, news reporters, they almost feel as though they're above the law and that the rules don't apply to them. That we all know that that's not the case. And as I look at the news every day and I see somebody else is ousted or another woman is coming out talking about her experience, it just angers me more and more. Our voices have been robbed from us for years. Women have been afraid to be vocal about things that have happened with them as far as domestic violence, sexual assault, harassment, stalking, any crimes against women and men. Men are also victims of all of these crimes as well. Our voices are just so gone and we feel muted. We have to be able to say Me Too out loud and not just as a hashtag, right? So social media is a great platform, but you need more Briannes and more Kellys to share their stories so that we can continue to inspire others to share theirs.
Absolutely.
And if we do that, the shaming will be more and more difficult because there will be more predators to go after, and the victims will feel like they're being heard.
One thing I could speak of, again, the shaming thing is one thing, but then you have questionable endorsements. And again, I try to not make my political feelings known, but the hardest thing, and I'm going to go back to Charlie Rose because I do have to speak something with him. Roy Moore, Alabama, running a seat in Alabama. And there's questionable given. There needs to be investigation. But there is repeated behavior that he even confessed to. and to endorse him as a means to prevent the other party from coming into that seat, I just have to question that. You know, in this environment where we're trying to give women enough courage to step up, and they're just not, you know, there's still a glass ceiling. I don't care about women's rights, what people talk about, there's still a glass ceiling. There's still inequity as far as pay. You know, and it comes in the news media as well. There's women that are getting paid $20,000 less than their counterpart that are sitting in front of the camera doing the same thing. So, you know, to have that inequity, then to see this going on with shaming and with, you know, and some people saying this is acceptable behavior because the way they dress, the way they look. We need to get beyond that. And let me go to Charlie Rose. That had the biggest impact for me because, as many of my friends would tell you, that I looked up to him. His interview style was engaging. It was, and he had two different interview styles. One as an anchor, which was extremely aggressive on CBS News, and yet another with the Charlie Rose Show. And I just admired the man. Then the news broke. He admitted it. Then the stories broke of what he actually did. I felt ashamed that I even looked up to him. You know, in fact, we joked about one time they had moved his table aside for a music act to come on his show. And we were both tweeting, you know, Charlie, if you're not doing anything with that table, you know, we want it. They could keep the table. You know, I thought that that thing would be destined for the Smithsonian. I think it will be in someone's garage sale, and they'll be lucky to get $25 for it. It's that de-escalation, and I can't, you know, I think about him in an entirely different light. I mean, you know, he had meetings in his condominium, and he would come out of the shower completely nude and sit down with his female coworkers and expect them to feel comfortable. I never could imagine myself doing that.
I couldn't imagine myself doing that.
It's just, I just can't, and it's thing, and I don't know. I just don't get it with my some of my co-males. It just, you know, I was brought up with a mother who was very dominating in my family. You know, and Kelly will tell you this. I always ask before I take anything. It drives people crazy, but I always ask, can I do that? Can I do that? And then, you know, talking about aggression against females, I made one mistake, and my sisters, and they were listening, and they go quiet every time I talk about this. I was abused by my sisters, ruthlessly, psychologically, not physically, but psychologically. They locked me in a room, put a piece of candy on a fly swatter, and as soon as they pulled it out. And so one time they got me so infuriated, the words came out. And this is right around when I was 5 or 6. I'm going to punch you. And holy moly, I got told very quickly that you do not address a female that way. You do not. You're a boy, and she's a female. You have physically, you know, superior to her, and you know, at that time, obviously. But you know, I went up, but they, you know, locked me in my room and did some horrible things to me. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter. So I was shown a great deal of respect. And I'm just wondering how these people were brought up, because in my world, it just, I can't imagine broaching some of the behavior. And they were showing a video of Matt Lauer the other day after the accusations came out, where, you know, I think it was meant to be a joke, but it was a very poor joke. Someone was ironing his pants, so he was standing there in his boxers, and his co-workers came by, the other co-anchors for the Today Show, and he just put his hands up, say, "Look at it, baby, look at it." And I'm like, I can't. Wow. Yeah. You know, and that's acceptable in a, even if it was a joke. You know, and we talked about this because, you know, there's always been suspicion about Matt Lauer and some of his co-workers having complaints about him. But as we move on, one thing we're going to have to do here, and then we'll move on, and is do our station break. So we'll be back with you in just a minute. Okay, welcome back. So, Brianne, let's get back to talking about some of the statistics about rape. You know, because we talked about domestic violence, and this is where it's troublesome because I've heard a lot of stories from people, and not just about the act themselves, about what they go through just to report the crime. So, do you want to speak with us about that? Just
can I go over a couple statistics first?
go right ahead.
Okay, so first let's identify what rape is. There's rape and sexual assault. Those are two different crimes, so let's talk about what each one is. Rape is a forced sexual intercourse, including psychological coercion, which means they make you feel guilty. It's like, oh, I took care of you last night. Why can't you take care? And then you feel guilty and you're kind of forced into it. So that can be a form of rape, as well as physical force, holding somebody down and forcing yourself upon them. Forced sexual intercourse means penetration by the offender and/or offenders. Rapes, it's often that there's more than one perpetrator.
Yes.
Rape also includes attempted rape with both male and female victims, and both heterosexual and same-sex rape. Attempted rape includes verbal threats of rape. Now, sexual assault has a very wide range of what victims look like, and they're separate from rape or attempted rape. These crimes include attacks or attempted attacks, generally involving unwanted sexual advances, which could be something as simple as a harassment or grabbing somebody on the buttocks or grabbing somebody's chest. Sexual assaults may or may not involve force, including such things as grabbing or fondling, like I just said, and it does also include verbal threats. So those are just two definitions of rape and sexual assault, just so that we can see the distinct difference. A crazy statistic is that every 98 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted in some form or fashion. Every 98 seconds, it's a little bit over every minute and a half.
And that's scary.
That's terrifying,
Yes.
actually. So that's just a thing I want people to remember. Every 98 seconds, an American, both man or woman, are sexually assaulted. So just a couple other statistics, and then I'll talk a little bit about reporting crimes and stuff. About 20 million out of the 112 million women in the United States, that equates to 18%, have been raped at some point in their lifetime or will be raped at some point in their lifetime. Only 16% of all rapes are reported to law enforcement. 16%. Among college women, 12% of rapes were reported to law enforcement, only 12. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention survey on the national prevalence of intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and stalking did find that 81% of women who experienced rape, stalking, or physical violence by an intimate partner reported significant short or long-term impacts. That could be something as I don't want to say none of it's minimal. It could be PTSD, it could be anxiety and depression, it could be suicidal thoughts. All of those things play a part in this, especially when only you go back and you look at that stat, only 16% are reporting to law enforcement. And if you hold that information within out of fear of telling or fear of shaming later on, all of those things, the depression, the anxiety, the PTSD, the suicidal thoughts, those are all things that become very real. Rape victims are often cope with drugs too, to kind of help numb the pain that they experienced. So that's another thing. It's so many facets to just one thing. 35% of women who are raped as minors were also raped as adults. I fall into that category. Compared to 14% of women without an early rape history. Crazy numbers. And 28% of male rape victims were first raped when they were 10 years old or younger. And so that goes back to that child molestation that I talked about with my story earlier, is, especially with young men, when they're molested as a young boy, chances are that they will likely be raped again. With all that being said, reporting the crime is the hardest part. I had a family member who had been assaulted, and she was terrified to call the police. And as much as I didn't want to convince her to go, I felt like I needed to convince her to go, because I wanted her to use her voice. I wanted her to feel empowered enough to say, this happened to me and I'm taking my life back. What wound up happening is the charges against them were dismissed, because it was her word against his. you know, the guy stalked her, you know, and he bothered her and harassed her on social media and through other parties, and just reporting is the scariest part. And then getting the rape kit is so, it's so intrusive, but it's so necessary. That's where we get the evidence so that we can continue to fight these. And but then you have to look at it too on the other side is, do all these states and counties have the funding to process these rape kits? And so there's a lot of big cities. I know New York is big, and I think Chicago is a big one too, where you got rooms full of rape kits that have gone untested, which again plays right into why is there such a low conviction rate for rape? Why is there such a low conviction rate for sexual assault? Because these kids aren't being tested, you know. And so there's so many problems with all of this, and all we can do is, again, encourage each other to use our voices, encourage each other to go to the police, be that voice. If somebody calls you and says, "Hey, you know, I've been assaulted," or "Can you come get me?" and then they disclose, it's your job as man or woman, whoever you are, to like encourage them to get their voice and find their voice. These statistics are scary and they're startling, and we have so much work to do. And then when you look at all these celebrities who have this power and this notoriety and can get away with it, it just gives these regular people more permission.
And how many people sat back and allowed them to have that power because of that very reason,
yes.
Being afraid to come forward and how you're going to be treated and
right.
viewed in the future.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's this, and again, I don't get it, this sense of entitlement that as a male or female that puts you in a position where you think this is perfectly acceptable, and I just don't get that. And you know, and again, we fall back on the shaming. And you know, if someone comes forward, you try to shame them. That's wrong. You know, unless it's a totally fictitious accusation, it is wrong to shame a person that's coming out. Yeah, and especially if they have valid evidence. Yeah, and so one of the things that also that I think that we have to look at in listening to a judge on our show, and in fact you were here when she talked about that, is the drop cases. You know, if we're going to have people that you know want to get back their esteem, to get back their self-confidence, we have to somehow, as our legal system, make them feel comfortable, have special victims units ready to make sure that they're protected, to make sure, and that's where folks like the Caring Place, they just had a benefit, the Sheriff Reynolds put on a benefit for them, which is well attended. And I really hope, and if you're out there listening, you know, we're getting close to the end of the year, if you want a tax deduction, please go to the Caring Place. They need a new facility. 100-year-old house, and we only have 25 beds for all the sexual assault victims in Porter County. So just to sidetrack, I wanted to state that because they do a great job in providing a safe place for women and providing counseling and services to get them back on their feet. So again, if we go back to this, what, from your standpoint as a victim, what was
survivor.
The survivor? I apologize.
We're survivors. Not
survivors, exactly. And that's something else we have to get into. And I've got to apologize. I'm still stuck on the victim standpoint because I do look at them as victims, but yes, they are survivors.
Victimized, but now
victimized and
yes,
survivors. Thank you. I'm getting beat up here
By
two very strong women. So, and that's something else that, you know, you talk to someone and that has gone through this. It seems like they have changed. They become, now that they've gone through it and have developed this self-confidence, and most of the women I've talked to that are survivors are very confident, strong women. And so that is something, you want to speak about that, what your change was and how you felt?
Yeah.
Because now you're providing service for other survivors.
Yes. With that being said, I kind of wanted to go back to, you know how we mentioned earlier, the cycle of going back is about 7 times on average for a woman to go back to an abuser.
Yes.
I still think that's crazy. 7 times is just a lot. So here I am, when was this, in 2004 when I finally left, so 13 years I've been a survivor. But what happened in the midst of all that, I built up my confidence, I felt great, I've been empowering people, doing my public speaking. With all that being said, I was married to a person who was abusive too. I'm recently divorced, and I didn't tell anybody until after I was divorced, because I didn't want anybody to judge me. Here I am, this person who's saving all these women and doing all this stuff to help empower them and give them their voices back, and my voice is at home being taken away every day. So when I say that, I say all of that to say, I am confident, I am strong, and I am a survivor, but I'm also human, right? And love is a powerful drug. It's worse than any heroin or cocaine or anything else. Love is a very, very strong drug for a person. And you do things and you do things in relationships that you don't even realize you're doing. I'll share the story if it's okay.
It's perfectly fine.
I was at a charity event where I was being honored as a survivor, and my ex-husband got drunk and beat me in the hotel room the same night. This is the first time I'm saying this out loud.
And I'm very proud of you.
We are.
Thank you for sharing that. It's important.
And again, this is something that we're witnessing. Women now getting the confidence to tell that story. And in the moment, how do you tell the story? It's someone that you went back to, and you thought things were going to change, but they didn't. They got worse. And but now you're free of that.
I am, and I will not make the same mistake again. It only happened once, but it was not to say that is definitely too many times, but it happened once, and I stayed with him thinking, women think we can fix everybody, right?
That's
We're
right.
mothers by nature, we're
He'll
nurturers.
change.
They'll change. I can make him change.
If I love him enough, he'll
Yeah.
change for me.
He'll change for me. And then when they don't, you wonder what you did wrong.
Right.
And in this instance, it took some time for me to figure it out. But when I left in March, I knew. I was like, okay, well, this ship has sailed, and I won't go back here again. And I didn't. And I have been the happiest over these last 6 months than I've ever been in my entire life, because now I feel like my voice is real. It's real now.
And I want to call back. What are you doing this weekend?
I'm graduating from Purdue with my master's in business. Woohoo!
Yeah, and I know someone that another show host that actually owns the station. He's going for his MBA, and he's still not done yet. You're done.
And I was working full time while doing it.
Yeah, that's great. And but that's some of the things that hate to say this, but you go through the worst of times to get to the best of times. And I firmly believe that. Sometimes I get stuck into myself, but we all go through that. And but boy, to get an MBA, and that is absolutely fascinating. And to provide the services that you're providing to other women, and providing the voice and helping them with their voice and their confidence to get back there. And that's why, again, I have to call the places like Caring Place and that needs help, and the one in Lake County.
St. Jude House.
Two. There's St. Jude House, and there's Haven House.
And then there's
Haven House.
Sojourner's Truth House too in Gary.
That's true.
Which a lot of people forget about that one.
Exactly.
Yeah, and actually, Caring Place was born out of, I think, Hobart, the area that was in Lake County at one time. So we do have to bring up those places and say that there are places for people to go that are experiencing this, and that will provide a safe place for them. And as we're talking about safe place, I want to bring up a project that we're going to be working on, which is a panel made up of survivors of various different things of domestic violence and rape and sexual abuse, harassment, and stalking. So you want to talk about that a bit, and then I'll jump in.
So let me first tell you guys that Bill is really funny. So he was like, oh yeah, you want to be on this roundtable that we're going to be doing? I'm like, yeah, sounds great, right? Leave it at that. And then I get a message like, oh, by the way, you're moderating it. I was like, oh,
surprise.
Okay, all right, I'm down. So thank you, Bill, number one, for even thinking of me to do it. I really do appreciate it. So what these roundtables are going to be, I think our first one is going to air on the 27th, correct? December 27th?
Right, I have to look in the calendar. We'll release that, but we were actually going to tape it.
Yes.
At a place that Sheriff Reynolds is going to provide, and he's going to provide security, so all these women will be perfectly safe. And so, and Dave Reynolds will be there himself. So Dave, I don't know if you're listening out there, but we really do want to give a heartfelt thank you for offering that for us. And he's been a very big supporter of the Caring Place, a huge supporter. He just put on a charity event for them, and which is phenomenal. He stood up to the county council and asking for money. So I mean, again, so Dave, thank you for offering that, and not going to disclose where it is, but we will let you know when it will be broadcast. It is going to be broadcast later on in December, though.
Okay. Sorry for kind of jumping the gun on that.
Oh, no, it's fine.
So what I've been doing is seeking people that I know who have experienced either domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, harassment. And here's the thing, all of them really kind of work together. Usually one comes with the other. Unfortunately, is the reality of it. So when I was out seeking a few women to come in and share their stories with us on the roundtable we're going to do, one thing I noticed was everybody literally had experienced each of the things that we're talking about, the domestic violence, sexual assault, harassment, and stalking, all while they were in an abusive relationship. Intimate partner violence is really that's where the issue, I think, that we need to really address is the intimate partner side. And that doesn't necessarily mean somebody that you're sleeping with, but that can also mean family too. These are people that you know on an intimate basis. And those are the people that are affected the most. The victims are somebody they know, somebody in their family, somebody that they're in a relationship with. So that was one thing I saw was it was all these people have pretty much a very similar story. You know, we all want to, and I have that same similar story. So what we will try to do on the roundtable is try to mix it up a little bit and talk, maybe focus a little bit on some of the stalking, focus a little bit on some of the sexual harassment and also the assault and domestic violence. But it's hard to find one person who's only experienced one thing. That's one thing that I've kind of ran into in just my work in general. There's not usually just one. It's usually a combination of things that have happened. And so it'd be really interesting to do the roundtable and have these women feel safe enough to share their stories and use their voices and really just inspire others. I'm excited for it. I'm really excited.
And also I witnessed, we had something similar. We had a roundtable discussion with family members of drug abusers.
Yes.
And one thing I learned from that, when you get people together that have experienced the deep hurt and deep mistrust, it is therapeutic, getting together and discussing in a round table openly. Now it's going to be interesting. It will be taped, so it will be edited. So if someone has to stop and take a breather, that will affect us. So, but it is going to be a therapy session, I believe. So, and it's great. And I've got to say, I have no qualms about asking you to lead this up. You were the first person I thought of when thought of that because of your experience yourself and the community you put together, Dimensions of Intersections, and again, for those of you who are not familiar with that, she has a Facebook page and you have a web page as well, right?
Yeah.
So you want to tell them about that, how to contact you?
Yeah. So my website is www.dimensionsofintersections.org, and there's a lot of information on there. I could be reached via email, just Brianne at dimensionsofintersections.org. And I also have a Facebook page that is, again, Dimensions of Intersections. You can look it up. You can just Google it. You'll find it anywhere. And then, if you need to Google my name, you can find me too. And I'm here to talk to anybody who might need any help. I'm always available.
Great. Getting back to this roundtable discussion, we're going to have a panel. I keep calling it a roundtable. We overuse that term. Panel sounds more comfortable. I don't know. And Kelly's going to be there. She's got her own story to tell, and then of course you're going to be our leader, and I'm just going to sit in the back. I'll announce and I'll just crawl in the back, and Dave and I will talk sports. No, don't get that. And believe me, one of the things that you have to know about our sheriff, who I really support because he is countering two huge problems in Porter County. One, our largest problem, the drug abuse problem, and he is engaging that daily and minute minute by minute. In fact, he just came out with a video that we shared on our Facebook page, two Facebook pages, The Walk and the Bill Moran Show. And so hats off to him. But after our drug abuse roundtable that we did, he came up to me and said, you know, Bill, we got to talk about the second largest problem. And right away I said, is that me in Porter County? And he said, no. And he said, but he raised his eyebrow. Maybe I ought to look into that. No, just kidding. Then he said it was domestic violence. And boy, when we began those roundtable discussions, I was just floored, absolutely floored. Everything from the act itself to, and I know sheriff's deputies and police officers that say domestic violence is the most dangerous thing that they can walk into. They would prefer to go in and bust a drug dealer or someone else, even if they know they have a gun, because they know exactly what they're getting into. When they go into the domestic violence situation, it will escalate out of nowhere. And their lives are in danger, the people that are around them are in danger, so it's kind of like walking into a minefield. So it is not an easy thing to go and investigate. And then ongoing all the way through that, you know, I'm sitting here listening to all the problems that occur, just from the time that someone is called out to investigate to the time it actually gets to court. And boy, that is not over when it gets to court. That's when things, it's like escalate.
Yeah.
You end up with threats. You end up with the defense attorneys trying to pressure the person to drop charges before, and it just goes on. And you know, to hear a judge say that for no apparent reason, there will be a very abusive case, and it's dropped out of nowhere. And this is one of our judges saying this. So. But anyway, so I'd say looking forward to it, because it is, but in a way I'm kind of looking forward to hearing their voices and having everyone feel comfortable. And believe me, that was my first objective, is to make sure there was a place somewhere else and have the sheriff pick the safest place in the county. So, and we're going to make sure that happens. And we probably will not be doing a live stream. If we do, no, we won't. We won't. It's going to be recorded and then edited and make sure everything is safe and put up there. And so Brianne probably helped me with what we should put on and not, and so on. So.
Hey, Bill?
Yes.
Can I share a couple more statistics
regarding
domestic violence? So I know we've been talking a lot about sexual assault and the things that have been happening with the Me Too movement, and but we did just talk about domestic violence being one of the biggest problems in Porter County, next to drug addiction and drug abuse. So I just want to share a couple things. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been abused by an intimate partner at some point in their life. That's crazy. And what's crazy is I'm sitting in a room with Kelly, another woman, and a man, and I know that out of the two of you, the 2 females here, we both have been impacted.
Absolutely.
So that's just something to think about. Severe physical abuse, to the degree of which I've experienced with getting beaten and assaulted with a gun. That's 1 in 5 and 1 in 7 men who've gotten to a severe degree.
It's both of us right here.
Yes. On a typical day, domestic violence hotlines nationwide receive nearly 21,000 calls a day.
And when you think of how many people don't call,
yes,
that's scary.
Yeah. The presence of a gun in a domestic violence situation increases the risk of homicide by 500%. So when the sheriff was mentioning that these are very dangerous situations, well, if there's a gun involved, it's an incredibly dangerous situation. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime in the United States. Intimate partner violence is most common among women between the ages of 18 and 24. I was 22 to 24 when it happened to me, so I fell right into the statistic. And 19% of intimate partner violence involves a weapon of some sort, whether it's a knife, a physical object, or a gun. A couple other things that we talked about stalking. 19.3 million women and 5.1 million men in the United States have been stalked at some point in their life. 66.2% of female stalking victims reported stalking by a current or former intimate partner. So stalking is directly related to domestic violence all day long. A couple other statistics I thought were really interesting. I mean, sad, not interesting, but sad. 1 in 3 female murder victims and 1 in 20 male murder victims are killed by an intimate partner. That's crazy. 72% of all murder-suicides are perpetrated by intimate partners. So when a gun is involved in a domestic violence situation, the likelihood of a murder-suicide is increased astronomically. 94% of murder-suicide victims are females. Women are more likely to be killed by an intimate partner in a murder-suicide than most. And sometimes they take kids with them too, and that's even worse.
Brianne, I'm going to have to start wrapping up
No
the
worries.
show because if I don't, the people who are on after me,
Yes.
I will suffer verbal abuse. And
We don't want that.
believe me, if you know these ladies, they're very good at it. And so I mentioned to me a couple of times I ran over to their show. And so listen, I can't tell you we appreciate you just not being on the show, but agreeing to lead this panel discussion.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
And again, the other thing I want to bring to light here is we will warn you when this is going to be aired, but also this is the last time you're going to be hearing us in this time slot. Next Wednesday, you will be hearing us at 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and those will be broken up. And the first, you will hear the Bill Moran show, and the second one will be All Rise. And so we'll be doing it with Megan Johnson. She'll be the other host. She hosts All Rise. So with that, and Kelly, you do have
Just a real quick thank you to Fluid Coffee Bar at 159 West Lincoln Way here in Valparaiso for keeping us caffeinated tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah, they've done that more than once. They're not an underwriter here, and we do honor our underwriters. We have great underwriters, but they have supported the show through providing caffeinated drinks for us, and they've actually come on the show a couple of times. So with that, I will wish you all a safe week and weekend, and please keep bundled. It's getting cold and windy out there, and we appreciate your support at this time slot, but look for us during the day. And we will also let you know when our rebroadcast is going to be, because I believe that's going to be changing as well. But if not, we always have our podcast available and our YouTube video available. So with that, I wish you a happy week and goodbye.
So how do you... Okay. So how do you...